Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on what part of the world you are watching this from. My name is Misa, and welcome to Canvas. Canvas is a show. I don't even really want to call it like a show. It's not a show. Okay, Canvas is a virtual event as of now for Christian creatives to be able to reset, recalibrate, and have concrete visions for the future. And so we're having conversations with amazing artists, people who are doing amazing things in the creative space. And we want you to join in on the conversation so that you can get more perspective than you would ordinarily get working alone. There is this saying that if you want to walk fast, work alone. If you want to go farther, you work with people. And that's kind of like the philosophy. So today, I like to put like some mystery to the guests, right? I don't know how necessarily this one is going to turn out because we are trying something new, but I will just go right out of the bat. I'm very excited to have this conversation. The person we are having today, if you have seen his face already, is fine. But if you know the person already, you can go type in the comments and go crazy in the comments. But the person we have today is an amazing musician. Like I first knew him as a musician before I knew like his art stuff. So it's cool. I'll read his bio as I do for everything, but he's an amazing person. One thing he doesn't know, I'm very sure he doesn't know, is that during COVID, when I was getting my fit body set, which I kind of have lost, um, open up the doors was like my jam. It was like what I was using to pump weight, and very amazing sound. You should have heard of him. If you haven't, you are going to want to check out his stuff after this event. But yeah, let me kind of like read his bio, and I'll give his name out in a second. So Angeloh is a music artist and art director with over a decade of experience in the creative industry, a leading voice in Afro gospel music. Angeloh was nominated for Rapzilla's.com freshman class of 2018 alongside Tobe Wingwe and other global talent. His music has been used in the Nollywood film movie, and his latest single, Sugar, is number one trending Christian love song since its release last November. I can testify to this. I use it as for my reel, and that reel is blowing up. It's my first taste of virality. Angeloh is a notable brand in the cover art and illustration space worldwide. He's a founding partner of, how do you pronounce this? BZLL, right?
Yeah, so
Okay, Bezalel Creative, the full service creative agency behind the rebrand and redesign of Rockfest 2.0. That's really live in Lagos. That's a story for another day. Last December, and also at the Basement Animation, an international award-winning animation studio based out of Lagos, Nigeria. Angeloh is currently working on new music, producing transformational entertainment content, and loving his lovely wife, Ajoke, and their beautiful daughter. Ah, God, well. So let us welcome to Canvas Virtual Stage, Angeloh. I need to be hearing your applause and everything.
I applaud
Um,
myself.
Welcome, Angeloh. If you don't know what we're going to be talking about, we're going to be talking about breaking stereotypes in Christian art. When we're thinking about this topic, your name was front and center in my head when we were like brainstorming the idea, and I'm like, I remember like this Instagram live that you had. I couldn't watch it to the full. Think it was around it was around the time, it was last year. I can't really
Yeah.
remember the conversation again. It's blurry, but it was like Christian songs not sounding Christian, and people were kind of like
Yeah.
weighing in, and there was like that, and I'm like, yeah, we have to have this conversation. It might be like a couple of months late from when it went viral, but like I feel like it's a very an evergreen conversation we need to have because it's something um that we solely need to talk about. So yeah, welcome, Angeloh.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so looking at your rap sheet, it's like there's so many things. Like love is already a full-time job. Uh, yeah, and then you are managing. It's not just music, it's creative directing. I kind of understand what that means. It's not just the art, there's the strategy, there is kind of like the branding aspect to it, there is a whole lot of stuff going out behind the scenes, and all we get to do is just enjoy chill music. Like, how do you balance all this, to be honest?
I think I'm very terrible at balancing it. Can you hear me clearly?
Yeah, I can hear you, I can hear you.
Yeah, okay. Like I'm still struggling to balance. I think I think maybe I shouldn't even try to balance. I think what I'm trying to learn now is to just focus on a project at a time.
Yeah.
So do something, be done, move to the next, be done, circle back. I'm always trying to do as much as I can simultaneously. I think another thing I'm also learning how to do now is to delegate more. So before, what I was doing was I don't sleep. But now I'm growing old. The spirit is willing, the body saying, bro, you gotta cut that 8 hours, bro. Take your eight
Yeah,
hours. So I'm still learning to figure all that out. But at the same time, we're growing, and so it's more like just some things feel like work, some things are not work. But then again, to especially now when you're trying to consolidate and build structures that other people can come into, um, I'm currently in a space where I'm, finding ways to harmonize what I'm doing, and also finding better ways to do what I'm doing, and finding more who's to join me instead of how to do it. To get
yeah.
out of my, I'm done being the super creative guy.
I see. I feel this struggle very much.
Yeah,
I it's I think it's somewhat of a curse in quotes, right? Especially when you are running with a particular vision, and then like delegating to make like everybody brings in their flavor, and we are not always willing sometimes to have any variation to what we are already seeing, whether it be for the better, whether it be for the not to
pretty good.
you get. Yeah, but like it's often a struggle, and it's so funny because I'm finding myself also in this position where I'm learning that if I need to build structures, if I need to build something that is scalable and something that would have more reach, then I can't do it
That it
alone.
has to be
And
outside of me.
yeah, yeah, you have to kind of like let some things go and allow that process. There's also like a process to it. So I am currently interested. I'm currently interested in gathering stories. I think that's what I'm very interested in, which is something I think as artists it's also important that we kind of like gather stories and
Yeah,
stories, local stories, right? Uh, it is like when you hear stuff like representation matters, yeah,
yeah,
and having artists who are doing stuff, who are doing amazing things in our climb come and talk, and let's
yeah.
hear your story. Let's hear the good. Let's hear the bad. Let's hear the ugly. Let's hear the in between. Let's hear the grind. There is a need for that. And I don't know if we have a lot of that going on right now in our space. And I kind of just want you to give us an intro into, you know, you coming into your creativity and how the current version of Angelo was built. Can you share, a bit of like your story, maybe high points, how
Eh,
you got there?
Yeah, so the first thing was my mom was a painter, my dad was a DJ.
Ooh.
Yeah. So he too also has like his own art thing, but it was more of a DJ at the time. So I mean, I was born into the world in the 90s, and immediately I'm soaking all kinds of art and music, right?
Yeah.
Then of course there's a TV set. I'm the only child, so nobody's dragging TV with me. So there's me being like soaking TV, whether I'm watching
Yeah.
cartoons or documentaries or televangelism or movies. So like I'm immersed in pop culture, I'm immersed in the music, I'm immersed in the arts from the start. Um, the other side of it too was I think I'm probably one of the few lucky people on the planet who had supportive parents. I mean, they were artists, so
Yeah.
nobody was going to try to discourage you from following the same
So you
shit.
gotta be a lawyer.
No, nobody disturbed me with all that. However, it's funny because I was very intelligent in my time. I don't know why I associate. So there was this whole thing about being the intelligent one means you should be a science student because
Science
science
student,
students are
yeah.
the intelligent ones.
Yeah.
So, and I had the brains for it. So I went to do science in secondary school at some point. But when it was time for me to go to university, I just gave myself brain and went to study art and called it a day. But before all that, I mean, like I said, there was that foundation. There was me also, being immersed in the doing of the art. So I mean, from all through my, as long as I remember, I've been drawing. So people be like, "Oh, you're very talented." Yeah,
Yeah.
probably, but I've drawn more times than most people have ever in their life. So the same way, I probably have talent in football, but nobody will ever know because I barely play it, right? So
Yeah.
um so I was always drawing. At some point, I'm the guy that was, after exams, I'm done with the exam, but we can't leave the hall because they say don't leave the hall. So I'm drawing at the back of my sheet.
Yeah.
I'm constantly in it. And then I was also like, at some point, I discovered that like, I was really, really into music. So um, I used to like write covers. So like I would take songs that were already made and I just like rewrite them with the same melodies and whatnot, learning
Yeah.
how those things happen very informally. Of course, then TV came. TV was a big thing, so there was also like that was the golden era of televangelism, like ministers on TV. So as much as I was getting cartoons, I was getting documentaries, I was also getting like church content on TV back to back in my face. So even though my family was a Christian family, but it's not like they only started going to church because of spiritual needs.
Yeah.
Like we're going to church for maybe deliverance, we're going to church for counseling, like matter takes you to
Yeah.
church. Yeah,
Yeah.
so my first interaction with even church was based on that's where you go when stuff has hit the fan and your sense can't solve the matter, right?
Yeah.
But somehow the watching ministers on TV was somehow planting seeds of faith inside of me too. So that was happening on the side. So I know as far back as I was like six, I was probably rewriting Jay-Z songs, PDD songs, like in Christian versions and stuff. It wasn't like I was even actively thinking about being a Christian artist. It was just my thing. Um, then, at some point, because my mom was terminally ill, she had diabetes, which would eventually take her at her 2011. But between that time, she was falling in and out of sickness and coma. So I had to, then the marriage too broke up. So I had to like live with 27 families in the space of 20 years. So I use that 20 years to say I've soaked human behavior for a long time. So in all of that, so there was also a phase of my life where I, like one of the people I lived with was like a group of bachelors who were like rappers, singers, musicians, managers, instrumentalists, producers. Like it was one big, small, tiny house, and we're like 15 people. So I had my fair share of, I would call it internship then, but it wasn't internship, but it might as well be because I was just soaking of everybody.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and I think that's basically what just happened. So from there, when I was ready to go back into school, I went to, university, studied art. So I was surrounded with art friends again. We were still exploring our creativity there when I was, um, before even going into school, I wanted to get a job. I got into an animation studio, which is the same studio I'm a co-founder of now. And so it's just like making the most of what I had part time and just blazing through it. Those were more simple times. These days, it can be very easy to get confused about what you're trying to do with your life because there's so many options. But like, it was pretty straightforward then what I knew I wanted to do, and I was just going at it. So, yes, we say 30 years down the line, actively pursuing all the things I know how to do. I'm here now.
It's it's very fascinating. So having like two two um two conversations before. We're having a conversation with someone, and he was like Colin, and he was like, oh, that his parents were academics, right? But at the same time, they were very cultured, so he was soaking up music from like diverse people, and you know, like I feel like something we find underrated is where we come from, right? Um,
Yeah.
there is the thing of nature and nurture, right? So there
Yeah.
are some things that naturally we will gravitate to, but then there's
Yeah.
also like this road of where we come from, and that helps um,
Yeah.
our growth and propels us
Yes.
towards like certain places that we would not have known regardless of,
Yes.
you know. And it's fascinating because now it makes sense why um, you are not in the mode of what we would consider, at least in like the African context, or maybe the whole context of what, you know, gospel music or gospel art should sound like, right?
Yeah.
Because you can in some ways kind of like trace it back to, oh, you had a quite non-traditional this thing, like and you know, those kind of like set seeds in our hearts. So that's fascinating. That is very fascinating. um so I'm guessing you're rolling into all these circles, right? And you've talked about like televangelism, kind of like putting up these seeds. I'm guessing that, and I may be wrong, I'm guessing that
Yeah.
your first foray into like the arts was not necessarily Christian, right? So what was like the turning point, if there was one? How did you say, okay, you know what, this is kind of like how I want to, what I want to build on. This is how I want to express art.
Okay. So, you know, so I mean, there are different phases of that for it. So, like I said, the first instance, I was born, boom, I'm here. My mom is
Yeah,
painting. My dad is like is raw, whatever is dope at the time,
yeah,
whatever is mainstream at the time is what we're eating, right?
yeah,
Um, then along the line, like I said, so, and the reason I painted that story was because all those seeds, like you rightly said, somehow come together to paint a picture. So in the middle of all that, there's heavy televangelism, like in my face, that I just for some reason found to be cool.
yeah,
Um, then of course, so like I said, I now moved on to I started having like my own downtime. Like I said, I had a foster kid experience, so
yeah.
like life was hard. But again, like I said, the understanding I had of church was it was the place you went
To
to
get to,
to get stuff fixed. So my idea was, okay, Jesus, you're the guy that gets stuff fixed.
yeah,
So have fun. Like, so I was a boy that was, first of all, so there was even the first phase where I was even reading the Bible as a storybook. Like, it was a huge, many of us that time when you thought
yeah.
Israel was in heaven. But it was a very fascinating book for me. So I remember reading through the book of Revelations like 4 times, 5 times as a tiny rat. I don't even know what I was looking for there. It was scary, it was exciting, it was sci-fi, it was everything all at once. It was giving. Um, so so there was all that. Then, like I said again, when I started to express my art, for some reason, I don't know. Again, like I said, at that time, I was not overthinking it, but I was like, why is Michael Jackson not singing Jesus songs? Like, I mean, imagine if it was like a Christian, like, I don't know why the idea felt fascinating to me. So, all those while I said I was writing covers, it was literally me writing Christian covers.
Oh,
And not like the cliche ones. It was me like writing. I mean, now if you're taking Westlife song, "You Are My Fire," I can't remember any of the things I wrote, but
yeah,
somehow there was a way those songs made me feel. And I was now a young child growing into a young teenager who was going through my kind of stuff. And at the end of the day, if I could trace it back to the only way I could find myself or find peace in the middle of all the pain or find direction or find instructions to condition me for when people that had sense came into my life. People be like, oh, you want to have sense. Well,
yeah,
if you don't know when people that have sense that can help you have sense come, that's a problem.
yeah,
So I was, it was the Bible, it was praying, it was, and again, like, this is not me trying to sound like my spiritual journey when I was younger had and still does has nothing to do with preaching to anybody. There's some people that like study scriptures and try to
yeah,
memorize it so that they can come and dish out them out. That was not me. The thing I was reading had to make sense to me to navigate
yeah,
here and now, right? So with the reason plot the life. So um So there was all that. So I mean, it was what was inside, and of course, I liked Chris Brown. I mean, this was me. I was young. Chris Brown, so small boy came out. Is it me? Is it not? Like, man, this is so cool. And like, so I was inspired by all that. And then when I got into, like I mentioned, there was a place I moved into where there were like a group of guys
Yeah.
that were all creative. So at that point, it was nothing about even being a Christian. It was just about being creative. Whether you were a good writer, so I was a terrible writer at the time. It drilled me. So at that point, it was about creativity.
Yeah.
It was about being dope at what you do. But like I said, when push came to shove, I always knew where I was getting my healing from and whatnot.
Yeah.
And over time, in the sense that in my life, I can trace God working in my life, literally. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, times when I was supposed to be kept out of school, times when I was thrown out of the house and somebody upstairs, like, at some point, it was so bad that somebody downstairs threw you out of the house and somebody upstairs came and picked you to live with them. So, like, all that was happening, and I needed music or something to help me. So, music was like therapy at the time,
Yeah.
drawing was like therapy and hustle at the time. So like, okay, now I'm singing all these songs, and I like the way some certain songs were making me feel, but they were not saying the
Yeah.
things that I really
That
wanted to say or really wanted to hear. So the best way to do it was rewrite the thing to fit what I
to
wanted to
fit.
hear or say.
Yeah.
And fast forward till 20, I think somewhere in 2012, that was where I decided that, okay, you know what? At that time, I'd become more proficient. I'd become more, my faith too was also like a little bit more convicted in what I was and who I was and who was helping me. So I always tell people, I love God. I know some people like to impress people. Like, so I feel like Christians try so hard to impress God. It's kind of like, you have to love God for God. I don't love God for God. I love him because he loves me. The moment he stops loving me, we have a problem. We have a problem. Like, I don't know how so far in this life. I love him because he's showed up, right? He's been showing up for
Yeah.
me. The scripture says we love him because he loves us first. I
Yeah.
have nothing to prove to him. He's God. I'm a tiny little me that will come and die when I'm old and go away. And more
Yeah.
people will still be happening. Um, so this was me. I'm like, okay, you know what? Now that these songs are making me feel this way, and then also at that point, I was also a teenager. I was also working in church. Not like I was working in church. The church was helping me, sorting school fees, sorting pocket
Yeah.
money here. So it was like the best way to even apply myself was to work in church. So I was
Yeah.
probably things, this one, things, that one, things, this one, things, that one. And so there was all that wealth of knowledge that was even helping me refine the quality of what I was saying.
Yeah.
And then I was becoming even more inventive on my own about what I was writing and creating. So I was like, Lord, you know what? If this thing is helping me like this, and I mean, I'm interfacing with plenty of my mates, I know there are plenty of us like this in this
Yeah.
space who we don't necessarily like some certain type of songs. It's funny now, like we did the worship, we did the pray, we did the
Yeah.
kabash. That time, miss me with that thing. It brings slow song and says, "What's wrong, brother? You're boring me to death. Give me my hip hop." And we'll probably get to that story too. But like, I wanna. There are people like me that were born into, like you said, were nurtured and cultured. So we're born into the MTV based era when
Yeah.
MTV bass was the big thing. We were born into TV,
Yeah.
we were born into hip hop and R&B and Kalala, no, they do them again. Continue, they sweet them again. Baba Fry, Yada Fry, you show him out. Like that was what we were born into, right?
Yeah.
That was what we understood. It was our language.
Yeah.
So I knew how to speak to people like me. I was like, okay, you know what? If this now that I have the language to speak to people and I have these things that I'm saying that is helping me, I want to use it to do the same thing for other people. So that's what happened, I think, at that 2012 point. And kept on refining till now.
Wow. It's one thing I find, and I hope that our audience is kind of like following us all through like this period,
Yeah,
because there are certain things that you are brought up that kind of like form a string, right, of things that
pattern.
we need to do. So for instance, it's there is community. So I remember talking to a poet, and it's like, oh, that having community, or in school they used to write poems, and that was kind of like how he started that. And they used to analyze, and it was what birthed that. But also the fact that he wasn't also good at it, right? Um, he was bad in the beginning, and it was those those writings, like writing every time, that exercise that gets him to this point of, I'm going to push my work out there, and the excellence that we see right now. And I feel like, as a creative, it's very easy to wait for inspiration, right? It's like, oh, I
Very
want.
easy to forget how you learned what you learned. It's very easy to forget how you became a bad guy.
True, true. It's like,
Very easy.
and I kind of like see that as a theme, right? And it's something that I also try actively to fight, is that there is that stage of building, right? Like, we want to be great, we want to be big, we want to do big things for God, we want to take over culture, right? We want to reclaim culture. But what work are you putting in, right? Um, how are you refining your skills? What are you also consuming that is enabling you? Because there's a consuming part we also don't put into play. It's like, I can't create what I don't know. I can't create what I don't have. I can't create what I don't experience, right? And like, we don't kind of like put all this into like that melting pot to actually bring something that is different and that would actually, in the course of time, shape culture and get forward. So I'm
Yeah.
guessing I want to kind of like see now forward facing music, right? Um, this is a very important question. I feel every creative will get to at some point. So you talked about being growing up in like the MTV culture, right? When MTV was big, I remember MTV being big. I remember, Nigerian songs. I don't know if to call it like the first wave, or like what we now
Oh,
of Afrobeats, like,
it was the wave. It was the
yeah,
first wave.
yeah, of like Afrobeats coming into and everything. So this there is somewhat of a disconnect, and let me explain. When I was in school, right, I remember songbooks. You get uh, I don't remember many people's names now, but songbooks. And
Yeah, all
oh,
the song magazines. That
yeah,
time
the guys will buy it, they'll come into class
they
and start singing and
memorize the
rapping. Yeah,
lines,
you understand?
bro.
And a
You have
lot
to be
of
up to
it,
date.
a lot of it up until like, I think maybe SS1 for me, when were foreign songs. So it was R&B, it was hip hop, right? So
Yeah,
you're growing up
def.
in that. Um, you're growing up with that. And at that time, we haven't gotten to that point of, really appreciating our sounds, right? So any anybody who were immediately going to consider cool was going to fit into the mode of like hip hop, R&B, right? And also in those beginning phases of trying to merge the two, that awkward phase, right? Because there'll
That
always be
awkward
an
phase.
awkward phase. So how
Yeah,
did
always
you
an awkward phase.
navigate that, right? How did you put up these two parts of yourself and these two different experiences, and say, okay, this is kind of like what I want to forge an identity or a sound on? How did that process come about?
Uh so I think in my case, because of how I think the only thing that was probably an awkward phase in my time was just raw. It was an issue of raw technicalities in the sense of it wasn't even about the comp. It wasn't even about the merging.
Yeah.
It was more about the skill in just doing the thing. So I mean, there are different type of houses, but either way, the bricklayer has to know how to bricklayer first. If he doesn't know how to
Yeah.
bricklay, the other conversation is never existing, right?
Yeah.
But and the other side of it too was I was also not somehow I think I was in a little bubble of my own.
Okay.
Bubble in the sense that I wasn't fully so of course I eventually had that, but then I was in a space where nobody was like really in your face trying to tell you this is not a thing that should be pursued. I don't
Yeah.
know, you know how some people like are in places where there's active
Yeah.
criticism on a particular
Against,
part.
yes, yes.
I didn't have that. So in a sense that I mean by the time that was becoming a thing, I'd already been formed.
Yeah.
So for example, there was a time, it's funny, I went for a radio interview yesterday. And the OAP happens to be one of those people that I stayed with at that particular point in time. He was part of the young ones. And we were talking about a producer friend of ours that time who didn't believe anything in, CHH or Christian
Yeah.
versions of anything. Um, so at that point for him, it was more of like, this thing sounds corny. You guys are just wasting your time.
Yeah.
But by that time, he couldn't convince me. In fact, what that happened was another elderly guy that was now a Christian rapper came to work at the studio, and the guy was so dope, it convinced him to, okay, this thing can actually be a thing.
Yeah.
But then, because it wasn't personal for him, we couldn't make any headway. I think we just made one song, and that was it. But the point was, I didn't really have a specific upward phase in that sense. If anything, was now when it was time to forge forward as far becoming more outward with your expression,
Yeah.
forge forward as far, okay, I mean, there are days where, we're in church and songs like Below God Win came and we're so excited to want to play it in church.
Yeah.
And, pastor was like, guys, no, don't play this, and there's all that whole debate. Is it about the song or you
Yeah.
are the artists and stuff? And then like 6 months after that whole argument, no, this is no judgment. I'm just saying based on what happened. Like Korede comes out and he's talking about bending people over. Like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, I see what my pastor was saying now.
Yeah.
I think I sort of get you, but at that point for me, I was already formed. So I didn't necessarily have an awkward phase as far merging.
Okay. So I'm guessing that it's in that growing. There is. I'm beginning to. I think it's in those undocumented times. So if I'm understanding your story well, right, it's like there was the phase of building, right? Where you're in school, you're living with these people, you're interacting with these friends, and so those are the phases of you like writing, technicality growing, and I think one thing that qualifies that stage and is the subconscious experimentation that many of us go through. And I think this is why it's important that as creatives, as artists, we do not neglect that growing phase. A lot of us, stumble upon something, right? You try it first, you get a lot of positive feedback, and you don't really think about like that growing phase. Like, I need to build, I need to work. It's more we are like, you know what? Let's start tackling, let's start going out, let's start doing that. And there is very underrated growing phase because in the news, all we see is the blow, right? Um, all we see is the blow, all we see is the glamour. That's all we are being sold, right? Yes, I think it's something like something somebody said something, I can't remember, it's a paraphrase. It's like there's a whole lot of background work, but once you make it, the whole thing becomes about the making it, right? It's like we suffer, but we made it. But I think we need to normalize the work, um, the building phase. When I started poetry, also, I why I can say that is that I also realized that one of the things I was very unafraid to do was um, experiment. It's like I'll go for events not because I wanted to win, right? But there was this idea in my head, and I wanted to see if I could test it and it will work, right? And a lot of that is undocumented, which somehow I feel bad because maybe the next 40 something years, and I'm looking at my head and I want to do like autobiography of my life. Those would have been fun to have. Um, but it's like there is a lot of work that really goes down to a mastery, to finding the voice, to finding the sound. And it's very important because it's when I started content creation, right? It was like the question is, how do I find my voice? How do I know what to say? How do I know how to sound? What am I going to say that is going to affect my brand? And these are like the things you're also thinking about, and things that are also quite necessary when you're building a brand. Also, it's like, how do I sound? How do I present myself? But a lot of times, these are the things that are usually built. If you are staying true, if you are staying authentic, these are stuff that are built like in the background. And it's very amazing to hear that, okay, yeah, we are building. And then when I knew that it was time um to forge out, there was a strong identity already in place for me to go out. So when I'm coming out, it's not like I'm figuring out my life. So there is something to this, and it's talking about like how we engage culture, right? I remember this reel that Dr. Foy put up like a couple of months, it was a month or so ago. It was saying, I'm talking about, being in working in like the secular space, right? And that if an artist comes, no matter who you are, you record song, sweet. I tell you, say, I beg, sweet. Come on, go right, I don't know if you
So I have a personal story about that, and you will continue after that. So this was my year one. So I
yeah,
studied in the University of Lagos. Um, so I went to study visual art, but the course is creative art. So like the first
yeah,
half of your school period, so it's 4 years. The first 2 years you're going to be doing both music, theater, and then
yeah,
fine art, regardless of what you came to study. You're doing all three.
yeah,
So it's from like year three. But that was at my time. They've stopped that format now. It was very powerful format. But basically, this was year one. We're rookies. We're here for a theater course, theater 101. And the
mhm.
lecturer was like, how many of you have acted before? Yeah, everybody, hands in the air. He said, how many? He said, if you have acted in church, put your hands down. And we were complaining. I mean, not even people. There was one particular soldier. There's always that extra sister, Maria Maka in your class.
Yeah.
And she was not like taking offense. Like, why would you say plan that? Man, I say, because you always clap for yourself, whether it's good or it's trash.
I'm not even mad. It's true. It's
No,
true.
like I was so mad.
Yeah.
She was mad, but like I was so mad. But like, yeah, like it happens all the time. Like it's so much where there's a huge danger. So although now it's a little different, and when I say it's even a little different now, I mean basically because church has become a very professional space to
Yeah.
some extent. And two, especially for those of us who play across inter slash outside church.
Yeah.
And I say that
Well,
because now
bridging
I say
secular and
well,
yeah, who
so
intersects.
even
Yeah.
even even before even the bridging of the secular, let me even say between bridging between church or Christian communities, we're
Yeah.
in a space now where if you're not good, you know you're not good. Nobody calls you.
Yeah. I feel
And
like I feel like there's a
and you
bubble.
could even be there's also the other side where it's and then sorry for interrupting, like so there's two things.
No, no.
You could if you're not good, nobody calls you. Then
Yeah.
there's the other side that you can be so good, but if your thing is not loud, nobody
Yeah.
calls.
So
So it's like
yeah.
so
No,
it's
continue,
it's a
continue.
huge shift. It's a huge shift. But there was once a time where you could do something terrible. It was trash. It was weak. But if a round of
But you
applause
got it. Yeah.
for Jesus, and
Yeah.
if you were not careful, you would think you're good.
Yeah. I don't even think if you're not careful, I feel like it made a lot of people very complacent. And
Yeah,
it's why I feel like there's some sort of bubble, and I really like that you brought it up. There are two sides, two extremes in the coin. It's like there are amazing people who don't know how to blow their stuff up and or don't get enough reach. But also we're living in this era where good the more exceptional ideas get very good reach or have a good chance
you
to
have a
get
better
reach.
chance of.
Yeah, it's like, so if somebody hears something that is good, right? It's like you're on your phone, you're playing that. Somebody's like, who is that? I can Shazam it, I can send it, I can do all that. And so it's like the better ideas, for like the lack of a better term, or the better sound, the better art
Better
tends
executed
to
ideas.
execution, yeah, tends to win. And I think this is something that in the church we're a little insulated from, right? I feel like right now you're more at the front lines. So maybe because from my end, I know I still see like a church, right? A funny aside, a couple of years ago, maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, um somebody rapped in church. I can't even remember. I don't know if it was amazing or this thing, but it was all right? It was all right. And my father was like jumping. So my dad is a pastor, so it was in front. It was so service had ended, and my mom says, see as you are jumping, see as you just a jump. You understand anything when the guy talk? It's like, as far as I hear Jesus, I'm jumping. And that is very reflective of how insulated our art becomes, right? Because for many people, they might not get the opportunity to perform or minister on a stage outside of their church, right? And the average like church demographic minus young people that would maybe for the sake of
And also us.
but maybe for the sake, let's not cause fight inside church that will not talk. You will hear people clap, you will hear people jump, right? And it was something I noticed very early on, and which is why this conversation is very dear to my heart, as many of the conversations that we're having is there. Because when I started poetry, I could feel the disconnect in the sense that there was a level of art I was aspiring to, but the people around me, there weren't many people around me who had that art sense, right? So I'm doing a poem and I'm saying, oh, how does this sound? And my friend is telling me, oh yeah, this is a reference to this scripture now. Yes. But I'm like, no, like, did you see how this sentence goes? Do you see the metaphor? Do you understand? Like this thing, there's an entendre here. Like, do you understand? Like, there was, yes, it's like and because of that, like, you can't actively judge, right, what the value of your work is out of church. And because I think this is where this is coming into, it's that church music is supposed to be for church, in quotes, like the default understanding of it, right? In like our circles, it's like, or maybe like the standard church ideal is that, oh, church songs are supposed to be for church. So we never really have this idea that we need to do things a little different, because maybe all our effort is not to sustain church, but also to go out there, right, and engage culture, get more people in. And it was always a hot button issue for me, and I feel like many people didn't see it. It's that till tomorrow, I don't know if it's a bad thing, but till tomorrow, I don't take applause that I hear in church as anything. Not because of this, is because I know that I can get away with saying Jesus is good. You know, I can quote one, I can do memory verse and say it's a poem. And like people will say, that's right. And somebody will choke 5K inside my hand after I say yes. You really, like, it is quite easy. But like, it's in the stepping out. It is in the going for like this secular event and doing something, and people are like, I haven't heard that before. And that's kind of like a gauge. Like, okay, so what was the thing that engaged you? And working that in, that has been very interesting. So I know you've had like somewhat of a conversation. I know that you have experiences with that. Like, were there any pushbacks or setbacks, when starting this course, saying Afro gospel, and I'm going to be doing my art like this in a way that is not traditionally sounding the most Christian, right? Was there any pushback, and like, how did you navigate that?
So another thing for me is like, I think for a long time. So I think when I started seeing what I will call, I will not use the word pushback. When I say pushback, is because it was not directly at me.
Yeah.
I think the moment I became more concerned with pushback was when I started becoming more of an advocate. There's a part where you're practicing something. There's a point you become an advocate of the thing. So I think I became more concerned with the pushback. So, for example, when I was doing all I was doing, like, I was not. I mean, yeah, there was a time when I was singing in church, but then after, like, I got burnt out with King's Church, so much activity and a lot of things that I wasn't satisfied with. So I got burnt out at some point. So when I went to school, I was in Unilag 4 years. I was not in any fellowship. I tried to join. It was another bunch of activity I was not interested in. I'm not saying don't join. I'm saying that me at that time, I was burnt out. So you have to understand that throughout that whole period, this was me performing Jesus-centered music in the midst of, I mean, this is university now. It's not
Yeah.
fellowship, it's not church. So this is creative pound for pound,
Yeah.
like street corner, light,
Yeah.
street light is on,
Yeah.
voice day, bass day. Person the whole guitar, the flow. You said the flow, the rap, you said the flow.
Yeah.
And you're feeling you because I'm on this Jesus. I just stay in the like say, but it's dope. So like from the very, I think the thing that set me apart was from the very beginning. First of all, when I was learning, I wasn't learning to be a Christian artist. I was learning to be a dope artist first.
Yeah.
Then when I decided I was going to use to communicate Jesus, it felt like my edge. Then when I started practicing it, I was practicing it in the midst of the people that it was supposed to be used for. So it had to be, if it was a Jesus inspired love song, it had to be sweet enough for the girls to sing like,
Yeah.
like if they're not feeling it, they're not feeling it.
Yeah.
You know, if it was a Jesus bar, it had to go pound for all the guys that are rapping with you in your class. They were like, bro, they
Yeah.
drop the Bible, they misbehave. It had to still be strong. So so I think what now happened was when I was ready to come on professionally. So why I said I didn't have it was because so I went for an interview, and I think one of the things that happened was I already knew what the stakes were.
Yeah.
So first off, up until I think it was long after I did songs with like T-Bars for sure. You know, there was Open the Door, there was Film and God. All that period, I didn't become prominent by playing church.
Yeah.
Till date, I'm not still prominent because I belong to one particular. I'm not the poster child of any particular church.
Yeah.
Like we were doing they said we should go and do the work in the streets. We were in there,
Yeah.
right? So I remember going for an interview, and the babe that the OAP that was there interviewing me, she was born again before that. She became an atheist for some reason, I don't know. And then she was having a heart to heart talk with me because she likes my craft. You know, she liked the music you were there. She was like, "Oh, this still thing, but it's dope, bro." But I mean, this is like 5 years, 7 years ago. And she's like, "Oh, but guy, you know, there's no active market for this thing, right?" I was like, "Yeah, I know." She said, "Yeah, now, I mean, you're singing, you're very good at inspirational songs. Say we just try and maybe do like, okay, see, do like Frank Edwards." Me, I was like, I hate listening to Frank Edwards. This was me at that time. I did, like I said, I didn't like, there were only very few, like there were maybe like 3, 5 traditional Christian songs that were my
Yeah.
go-to. After that, miss me. Then of course, praise and worship because it was turned up.
Yeah.
So now it's praise and worship. It's turned up. It's not really about the song. It's turned up. So but I didn't want to be that guy. And she was like, because that was the easy money. Like you do that, you do it
Yeah.
well. At least there's an available market. You know, you can work towards.
You can
Churches can
plug
call you.
into, yeah.
Churches know what to do with you. Underline that statement. Churches know what to do with you. And then no, you don't want to do that. Okay, fine. Or you say you do inspiration now. You be like best, Timida Kolo, you know. So at least the
Like
secular
I still
space
Christian, but
knows what to
you
do
know,
to you with you. You're not
yeah.
in their face. You're clean. You're all right. They know what to do with you. And I was like, I want to say Jesus when I want to say Jesus. There's a way the thing is doing it. I want to do it.
Yeah.
And so I was like, you know, you have to understand there's a likelihood that nobody's going to call you because right now you're trying to do something that does not exist in the space. There's no active market for it in the space.
Yeah.
So you may end up being the guy that works so hard, try to push the thing, and you just waste your life. 3, you
Yeah.
may end up not wasting your life, but you will not really enjoy it because you just have worked so hard for some small children to come and collect it and now be the ones that have blown inside the thing.
Yeah.
And 4, maybe with some stroke of luck, faith, and awesomeness, you might just break. So
That's like after a lot of that, the probability wasn't
whatever
looking very
happens,
good.
it was not looking good. It was literally like, Lord, okay, oh God, you know what I'm going to do. Help me sort out these other things so that I can do this thing the way I know I need to do it.
Yeah.
So at that point, it was then when I went from there, I was going to do art shows. So like art, all these like the schools were doing art exhibitions and stuff. I'd go, somebody will come and sing a very seductive song. I'd come and sing Open the Door with my friend playing the guitar. People be like, man, bro, man, it's Christian, man. Bro. That was the effect I was going for. Like because you're something you said, when you're in church, anything can fly the moment you slap
Yeah.
Jesus on it. When you're outside, nobody cares. You have
Yeah,
to come correct. If you're working miracles, the miracles better be working. If it's creativity you're bringing, then it better be creative, bro.
because nobody
And
said your last
then
name.
nobody sends you. So the extra now is that, oh wow, you're creative and it's Jesus, man. Now you can talk to me.
Yeah,
Oh wow, they make money. You don't rob anybody. It's Jesus. Oh, now you can talk to me.
it's it's so funny. I can't remember who this artist. I think it was on Sway, but I know it's not Lecrae. But it
Probably
was
at
on
the minute.
Sway. Yeah, I don't know. But he made a
Was he white?
statement, right? I can't remember. Like it's for like
I can't remember.
I can only remember the quote. I can't really remember uh the person. But he was like, one thing I'm very sure of is that every Christian artist that is dope, right, fights with one hand tied behind their back. Right? Like
Yes.
because you have to your lyrics, your
There are
sound
boundaries.
has to, yes, you have to be correct in in the theology. You need to be sound, you need, so it's like,
You need to be sound, you need to be pure, and you need to be
yeah,
dope simultaneously.
yeah, so
So the
like
grief is extra hard.
it is, it is, it is. And I, you know, growing up in that bubble, if you're in that bubble, you don't realize that. And also, like this culture of uh it's Jesus, let it doesn't, the market will eat you. And especially when you're coming to a place where, like you said, there isn't really like a defined market. Like it's just now that the market is coming up, and
No, no,
we
like
would,
now, the
yeah,
people have been paying the dues. This is
but-
like 5, 7 years after the fact, so it's
yeah.
beginning to take shape. Mm.
So we will touch back on that, but I want to hear your thoughts on what would you prescribe for Christian artists, right? Do you think that it is necessary that we all go out there and test our metal in the street, right? As opposed to the bubble of church.
So the thing is, when it comes to that issue of testing of metal now, I don't think I even have anything to prescribe because like I was saying before. So let's even see when you had to make the example of when they were just hailing you and not really understanding what you said. Like you, I mean, you had to go back a few years.
Yeah,
You had to go back like 4, 5 years. I'm not speaking for all churches, but if I'm to say our generation of churches, so I'm saying the new churches that are up and running now at capacity, there's a sense of excellence. Like they might clap for you to encourage you, but everybody knows it's encouragement. You get what I'm saying. That's if
yeah,
they even clap. And I mean, there are some parishes that the guys are unruly, man. They boo you with pastor on stage. Nobody cares. And I mean, there are even some churches where the pastor himself is the one that will cut the choir singer and say, "What rubbish? Why are you singing off key?" And he has to not come in and run the roof properly. So you like there's a standard. You can't drop
yeah,
the ball.
yeah,
So I think the church, as far as creativity and creative excellence has come, I think to some extent, especially for the new churches, have grown way past that point where you can get away with things just because you put the name of God on it. Like
yeah.
excellence has now become a staple.
Yeah,
So in that context, it's no longer a thing of whether you have to go outside to test yourself. Um, the conversation is now more about what exactly is the purpose of what you do,
okay, okay.
and that will probably be another conversation.
Teacher. Yeah. So I said I was going to come back to this, right? So
Yes.
uh thoughts on what the market is right now. So Rockfest, I was unable to make Rockfest. It was a
You missed.
very, I know I missed.
You
My
missed. You
sister went.
missed.
My sister went. So
Uh-huh.
I saw video and I was crying.
You were prepared.
I was crying. Um, but very, I can say in the last, and I mean like, so so here are two things, and maybe I'll go back a little and come forward. Is that so? Um, you said that for a lot of new generation churches, that excellence in art is it's becoming more perceived. And to be honest, I know what you're talking about. I see that, right? A lot of pastors are even, in the creative space.
Bad guys now, they
Yeah,
were creative too when they were
so
young now. So you
they
can't, you can't
know, they
just, you can't
understand.
just, you can't just,
Yes,
you can't just do
come
nonsense
and
here
do
like this,
anything. Um,
bro.
but then there are still a lot of people who, maybe coming up, maybe they don't necessarily have independence to choose new age, newer age churches. You get still a lot of people like that will fall into the demographics of like older churches and like the way things have been done before. There is some sort of there is still some work to be done.
Yeah,
So there is kind of like the way I'm seeing it, there is kind of like the word is not coming out, but navigating church, right? But knowing that your message is not only for church, right? Your message is for the world, right? Navigating those two. So how do you kind of like, and this is now in the context of like older churches. I don't know if you have much experience with that. How do you kind of like merge that, come in and say this is the new sound? How do we engage, right, simultaneously, or is there a way to kind of like engage simultaneously the old this thing, or maybe not even simultaneously, but engage
yeah,
the traditional idea of church, right, and how we are to
yeah.
sound, and the world's perception of how we are to sound, because the world also has some perception about that.
So in answer to this question, I'll probably go take us somewhere else. So before, I used to always be of the opinion of trying to change systems or change people or change cultures. And of course, to some extent, we need to, there has to be change.
Yeah,
And even the old church we're talking about, too, like, to be fair, those were the new churches.
yeah,
And the old ones before them were the new churches at a particular
yeah,
time. And if anybody is fair with their church history, you realize that there's always evolution in every generation of church, just as there's evolution in every generation in the world. Um, and the reason why I say this is because, for example, if we talk about music, so I also chose my language very clear when I said, for example, when I was talking about being born into the MTV based generation, something like that was our culture, that was our language. I know I said those things specifically because what we try to do these days is like, I'll use an example, it's like a Yoruba person faulting an Igbo person for praising God different, simply because he's not doing rababa. He's saying
yeah,
Chineke, like,
yeah,
that's literally what we do when the older church tries to tell the younger church, oh, this your Afrobeat, this your hip hop thing, or this your dread, or this your thing you're doing. It's not. And we too also make the mistake by then you tell them, oh, you guys, you're a cake,
yeah,
you're in your own, you have to come out of your holy and now, like, it's culture,
yeah,
right? The same way I was telling somebody, I said, hey, boy, we waste so much time on musical genre. If you just do a Google YouTube search, synagogue worship in Israel,
mm-hmm.
that YouTube search, if you were not the one that typed it and you passed by, you probably think it was the mosque beside you leading
Yeah,
their 1 o'clock prayer. Like when you go to the church in everybody keeps quoting the church in China, the church in
yeah,
China. The church in China does not sing Yahweh, Yahweh. They
true.
sing Chinese sounding songs, man.
Yeah,
Like they probably have, if your song gets there, then they have to learn it the same way we too are probably taking some Spanish songs and try to learn it because we really, really love the song.
yeah,
So I feel like when we have an understanding, so I think what happens is that as people, I don't even think it's a church problem. As people, we don't remember how we came up. It's like fathers or elderly people who are trolling their children for want to have dreads. And I'm like, sir, if I pull up your teenage picture passport, you had afro. Why are you stressing me?
damn.
Afro was raining in your time. This is
Yeah,
what's raining in my time. Like, allow me be young. You were a young person too. You had there was a time was perm and side
yeah,
parting. It was your thing and your generation. Our thing now is this. Like, if you remember that you were once a young person who was wearing boot cut. I think it should help you understand why I'm wearing palazzos now.
Yeah.
Like it's generational, it's cultural.
Gotcha.
It does not inherently change. So I think even we try so hard to change, which is where at some point, if you say, "Oh, I really like my church," well, maybe you should probably wait till your generation has some influence,
Yeah.
and then you can properly introduce
To do that.
whatever you a taste of, because what it is really, like you said, is representation. We want to see people and expressions that look and feel like us, which is
Like
why
us.
something like prayer walk was very powerful. Because if it was a bunch of, I mean, and this is even in the same generation, it was a bunch of SU young guys that
Yeah.
gathered to lead prayer walk, it would not, I know it's not being boastful, I know this for a fact, it will not spark any news. Why? People expect SU youth to be prayerful people.
Yeah.
They are the ones that terrorize.
Yeah.
They are the ones that wake up for morning devotion. It's normal. So you come into
Yeah.
2020 and you see a bunch of people in afro, in dreadlocks, in ripped jeans, all kinds of piercings, all
Yeah.
manner of colors of hairstyles and clothing you don't understand. And you drove past and they were praying down heaven.
That
So
changes that conversation
it
entirely.
changes
Yeah.
the conversation entirely. So at the end of the day, I feel like we need to understand our parents more. Parents should also try to understand us more. And when we can't understand, at least empathize enough to
Yeah.
remember that you were once a young person.
True.
And your young people to try to creatively, which is shouldn't be hard, like there are older people around you.
Yeah.
Of course, it becomes difficult because a lot of old people make terrible decisions too, so you don't even rely on their counsel. But like if you can be objective, you will realize that when you grow older, you will most likely make the same choices they're making.
Yeah.
Or be
You have
pressured by the same
biases. Yeah.
pressures.
That
You
that
have your
that.
own biases. Our generation is going to have serious bias with the next generation. I mean, most
Yeah.
of us can't keep up with Gen Z, and we're not very far. You get
Please,
me?
please, please stop
Like Gen,
spoiling.
like Gen Z
Stop
run
saying
circles
my life
around,
story.
they run circles around, but like sometimes like, man, I'm like, oh, okay, now I understand. I mean, I imagine what parents were 30 years apart from you. This is
Yeah.
just 10 years gap we're talking about. It's driving us crazy. Talking 30 years gap. Come on now, you can't be on the same page. You can
True.
try to understand.
It's very and I think we can also put that into like everyday life, like this what you said, that it's
Yeah.
like one of the things that made understanding my parents very easy was kind of like understanding where they were coming from. It's that what I would tell people, that I know one day I'll be a parent, and I would know that all these things are like you would have to sit yourself down to say, okay, do I really want to do these things that I was against before, right? And there is some perspective to age, and it's so very funny. Um, I've been reading like articles online and stuff like that, and there is one particular article that showed um, innovation. So AI has been trending very recently. So I think there was a Forbes article saying AI will make so and so people lazy. Teachers are angry about AI. Then they now took another snapshot of like a newspaper article saying teachers are complaining that television is doing this. Another one where people are complaining that calculators are spoiling mathematics. Down to like the point where like people were
Typewriter.
shouting
Go.
that yeah, there was computers, there was typewriters, there was even books, right? There was a time where
Even
they were saying
books.
that, yeah, when
Even
they were saying
books.
books were ruining the youth because the youth was
You
spending too
couldn't
much time
memorize things
reading
anymore.
books. No,
Yeah.
that they were spending too much
Not even
reading
they're spending
books.
too much time reading books.
Yes, there
Like
was a time like that. And so it's like every generation, something new comes out that kind of like confounds the old generation. And we take for granted this space and time that we are in, that enables us to adapt to certain things quicker, right? And then overlook the fact that, in let's say a decade or so, we would not be so open to, changing our view of the world, right? So quickly. And that's like a whole other like psychology demographic conversation, but like it's very
that's
amazing
a
to hear that. So we're kind of like wrapping down. There are kind of like some
Yeah.
questions I maybe not very deep, but sweet questions to ask. Um, and one of them is, do you really think is there need, right? Do you think that there is a need for we okay, so first of all, I'll ask if what are some common stereotypes you have faced, when dealing when we identifying with Christian art in like this alternative form that you presented.
So when you say stereotypes, from what perspective? Like from
From
elders' perspective,
I
or
want to I
from?
want to maybe so, I don't really have I know like they come from all around, so
Oh,
you can
well,
hear
true,
them
true, true.
from church. If you're in a secular space, right, there is some stereotype that you kind of like have to break, when you're so in whatever circles you're going to face a couple of stereotypes, because just saying Christian music, Christian artist comes with his own baggage. That's why I think, was it like in the 2010s or so, it was like I'm a rapper that's
Right.
Christian. You understand? Like
As Christian,
that was part of like the reason why. So what are like some of in our context of being Nigerians, Africans? What are some of like the stereotypes that you have needed to kind of like break away from, or that you have faced, needed to deal with?
um, so there's the part of you having to come to terms with knowing that some people think what you're doing is not serious because it doesn't look serious, because you don't squeeze your face and sabadabadababos every five
Yeah.
seconds. Um, so there's a whole lot of presumption that what you're doing is not a serious thing because of your approach. There's there's also another presumption too that. So I remember I was in a meeting one time with somebody, a senior person, and the person was like, we always worried about you guys, you young artists, because I mean, you need to be sure you're spiritually grounded, you're disciplined. And I was like, between our young generation of creatives and the pastors and leaders of our lifetime, who have been in more scandals than who?
Yeah.
Like, like
So yeah,
when, like on the scale of misbehavior, what if we're, I
who
mean,
can
there's,
be
I don't
what?
believe in,
Yeah,
if we're calling or demographics, forgive me, like if you're going to take the stance of indiscriminate and respect all the others English, indiscretionary behavior as a yardstick between
yeah,
this particular group and the other groups, who has been more in the news and nobody died. So
yeah.
why is that? Because I mean, why that is also painful, because a lot of people have not taken steps to encourage or support or
To deal
enable
with that,
the
yeah,
expression because of that ideology. And I'm like, you support the people who do it all the time and nobody dies. Like, why? Um, I mean, when you go into the secular creative space, there's the case of, you guys are not saying, like, I mean, there's a known thing in our generation. To be fun equates to sinful. Like, fun
yeah,
begins where the sin begins. Like, the fun
yeah,
starts when the sin starts. So some people don't even know. Like, I mean, I went for an event. And it was a Christian event, and some of the people, they were like people who were not necessarily, they were like church guys, but not really believers. Even the MC. The MC was so shocked about how much fun he was having and how much fun we were having. Christians were singing or Baringi songs, my songs, Blaze songs, jumping up and down, having
yeah,
so much of a blast on mocktails and juice. Yeah, so I mean, on the creative side, creative industries that are trying to interface with in the world. Um, I mean, there's a part of you knowing that people think your thing is funny. Like I said, there's in the world some things pass only when they are sinful activities. So you have to have sex in the room, you have to
yeah,
have vulgarity in the room, you have to have
yeah,
alcohol and substance abuse in the room. That's when fun starts. Meanwhile, we've come to a place where we, and again, it's not something that was always there. I mean, thankfully, we always had praise and worship and Friday night video. and Thanksgiving services. But now we're in a space where we have more expression and freedom to have fun even in
Yeah.
cultural contexts. But we're still glorifying
Yeah.
God, but it's not necessarily a service. So but again, there's part of people like, oh, this thing you're doing is fun. You don't for it. You guys are just wasting time. There's another batch of people who are probably thinking, oh, we're just fine. You wanted to do that, but me get my so that's what I think. And then there's also the part too where you have to also know that there's somewhat even so this one now affects people that are really dope. So of course, thankfully because of technology and community that is able to do it around internet and so whatnot,
People
some of those
can.
barriers are being broken now. But there was a time where if you were a Christian, creative, no matter how dope you were, when you go to some certain platforms, they want you to drop Jesus. And it's not even like they want it. It's a thing that's happening now. And nowadays, especially in countries where there's heavy censorship. I'm watching TV. Somebody said he was even trying to swear, or not like they were trying to say in Jesus like his Lord. Just want to say, censored. I'm censoring Jesus now. So
In the
there are
same
spaces
breath
where there's
as
an active
crossword.
um, you get me, like so, like, and it was not
Yeah.
because it was the name you get. So was seeing reports of people being thrown out of malls because they wore Jesus branded shirts. Like those things are also things that happen in real life. So there are economic, pushback. There's spiritual. No, let me not say spiritual. There's religious pushback. There's cultural pushback.
Yeah.
But again, there's also opportunities too for expansion and exploitation. At the end of the day, you have to find.
Okay.
That'll be great.
Okay. I'm not checking. This. It makes sense. Like this is. One of the interesting things, and one of the things I really like with conversations is we go into certain conversations thinking that, oh, this person will confirm one or two things, right? But it ends up opening your eyes to something you haven't seen, right? Or like things that you did not think about concerning certain topics. So like that's fantastic.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
I think I'm about to
Yes.
round up here, and I've said it at one time so many.
Yeah, sounding like a pastor now.
It's like
As you ramp up the service.
yeah.
45 minutes later, let's
or,
do it.
or like Paul. God, how did Paul used to put it again? I forgot him. So yes, this is going to be the last question. I know that there are many amazing artists, Christian creatives, watching this, right? Who will by watching it now or take their time to watch everything later. And as somebody who is at the front lines, who is pushing culture, if you look back at your journey, right? What are some things you would advise, the next generation, people that want to, engage culture, you get who want to create something new, something different from what is already known. Now, what would you tell them? That would be like, maybe 5 things that they should watch out for.
A lot of times you're going to feel angry. A lot of times you're going to want to revolt and tear down the structures, which might not be a bad thing, but one of the very important things to do is to always maintain discipline. When I say discipline, in the sense of that type of discipline where even though maybe like your mom, for example, might be taking, I mean, we love our parents, but sometimes they can be extra. But that line that you don't usually just cross.
Yeah.
Like you can let her know you're not happy with something, but you get one line where they cross.
Yeah. It would enter disrespect.
At least if she's reasonable enough, she knows okay, at this point she has pushed too far. Right? So
yeah.
And I mean, in some cases, you may not be lucky to have elders who are that understanding in the first place. So, but you want to make sure you You want to make sure you're blameless at all points. That is when all is said and done, in your heart of heart, you're blameless. The other thing too is community. Um, some of the things we are now, sometimes people just want to jump. Like relationships are everything.
Yeah.
And even for me, it's something I'm learning a whole new level now in 2022, in 2023 rather. Relationships are everything. So if you're going to be part of that new thing, you have to be a part of it.
Yeah.
So somebody else is doing something. You can't just be on the outside trying to be a part of the thing, or you're just trying to shoot your shots at the people that are inside so they can just plug you. No.
Yeah.
Whatever level you can, be a part of it. If you can't be a part of the bigger person's zone, the next person beside you, you guys can come together and be a part of your own small thing you're building. And people come to that. Before you know, you've built a community that's making sense. Now, I mean, there's shows, they're talking about Rock Fest, we're talking about all these other festivals. They were once small parties in one small, tiny location, one small group chat somewhere, one small social media page that people are shabby just following, one small person releasing one track here or there. It is now people rallying around it. I mean, some of us have gone as far as people invited us for events that were supposed to be the headliners. We were the headliners of the event. Our faces on the poster. We still paid for tickets. Then got to the event and was turning up for the other activities. Like as if we're the ones that had, like, these were things that people do. I mean, for people that even know someone like Gabe Baba, for example, they know him for going up. You see him in shows, he's there jumping in the front row for whoever is next performing. Like, that's how we roll. If you understand that it's community, so first things first, respect. Respect. Secondly, community. Like, serve the community, create community, serve community. Third, love. Love in the sense that in you trying to even build this community or serve a community, love is going to have to drive everything you're doing. And I'm not talking love like this hanky panky, utopist sounding thing. Like the Corinthians version of love is patient, it's kind, it doesn't take the other person for a ride, they forgive things. Because even as you're joining community, people will offend you. Situations will offend you. So you need to, so in addition to that, there's love, there's resilience, there's the inward resilience as far when people and situations will offend you, and you have to push through that, you have to rise through that and be the bigger person through that. Then also the resilience to follow through on the vision that you have, the vision you were given, or the vision you were inspired with. So I say that being, I know some people say, oh, the Lord came down in the vision of the night. I mean, the Lord didn't come down to me in the vision of the night. I don't know what that is. So that's why I said some people they will give it to you, some people you'll be inspired, some people you wake up and decide. You know what I'm saying? I said, and David proposed in his heart to. It's not all the things he proposed in his heart to do that were bad, right? So like I said, one, discipline, community, love, resilience, and so even that love, I have to go an extra empathy. Empathy. So there are so many sides to empathy. Empathy as per understanding why, trying to understand why the elders behave the way they do, try to understand why the youth behave the way they do, try to understand the needs and the pain points, try to understand how the structures you're trying so hard to say they need to change, understand why they exist first, understand why they do what they do, understand what they even need. Maybe we're wasting time catering the wrong thing to the wrong audience. Right. Then also empathy on the other hand. So like there was a video where a senior man was dragging people who their Spotify rap, have some senior men, then have one or two other worldly senior men. And a very close friend of mine, John Ijachi, was saying he saw the same thing. He saw that same clip and he was like, if we were designers, it's funny how when designers and product designers look at feedback, something happens to us when we look at human beings' interaction with things. Even though there's a result we want, when we see people's interaction with things, it helps us take note of maybe something we need to change or tweak or improve on. So now you have people who are eating this kind of senior heavy Baba worship, but they are still coming to chop this random secular quote unquote dirty vibe. Maybe you
Yeah.
should ask yourself, what exactly is this vibe doing
What
for
is it
them?
feeling in their life? Yes.
What is the gap it's filling? And maybe if you understand that gap, you'll probably understand why Afro Gospel and Co are essential. Because in the words of my friend, he said, when God saw Adam, Adam was in the garden. Adam had animals and stuff. It's not like Adam was lonely. He had things around him. But
Yeah.
God said, this guy has a need. These animals can't meet that need. There's a feedback Adam is giving me. It's not good for this guy to be alone. If it was some of us would be like, no, Adam, you have to be strong in the Lord.
Yeah.
But he has a need. Even God goes out of the way to meet needs. So empathy, discipline,
Discipline, love.
community,
Yeah.
love, and man, then finally, learn your thing, man. Be the baddest at it. Nobody cares if you slap Jesus on top. It is back to back. Yeah.
Yeah. That's I couldn't have said it any better myself. Thank you, Angelo, for being here. Before we
Thank you so much for
disappear,
that.
I know that something just dropped, right? As at the time of this
Yeah,
recording,
yeah,
something just
yeah, yeah,
dropped.
yeah, yeah.
So
Ooh,
so
something
tell us,
good.
tell us, tell us something good that dropped, and then other stuff that you would like us to go check out.
Shamelessly plug myself. Um, so since 2019, like I said, my name is Angelo. I'm a music artist and an art director. I make Jesus music and love songs. So since 2019, I've been putting out love projects. And my love projects basically address the twists, the turns, and the many phases of love as human beings, Christians, we experience it. I've been broken-hearted before. I've broken hearts. I've also said stupid things. So many of us are going around telling them, the Lord said you're my babe. Meanwhile, the Lord didn't show you since then. And maybe you thought the Lord showed you, but it was your imagination. And maybe the Lord showed you, but you didn't even know how you were supposed to just toast the babe.
Yeah.
You know. Um, and some of us are who are also madly in love with our wives. I mean, you're here, you're preparing, getting ready. And like we just happen to discuss now, there's a need.
Yeah.
There's a need. Because I mean, if you want to know how serious that need is, check every wedding. I've seen very serious apostolic brothers go to wedding and just for the joy of the moment, man, the things we have to dance to. But you might be
That
like, oh, you
everybody could
should go.
just
But I'm like,
breakfast.
we're here to celebrate. Like the honest truth is,
Yeah.
we're in a celebratory mode. There's
Yeah.
no way I'm going to come and be like I'm here to turn up and celebrate. And like I said, it's a culture. In a particular culture, this is the kind of sound. I'm not going to go to China and try to tell them to use Igbo sounds
Yeah.
because it's appropriate, right? So that's what I do. And in line with that, I've been releasing singles this year on the road to my new album, Love Child. So I have Love Child 1, Love Child 2, Love Child 3 every year for the past 4 years. Love Child, the album is dropping this February. I released a track titled Sugar, which we talked about. It was the wedding rave of November, and it's still going. And today, my next single titled Something Good. Something good is coming your way.
Yeah.
Something
Something
good
good
is
is
coming.
coming.
So it's out now, it's out everywhere. I have my album Experience is coming on the 5th of February. So myself and as many people who would love to get tickets to attend that have the opportunity to come hear the rest of the album before anybody else and have fun with me and hear the stories, hear I'm a ball, and also party with all my favorite friends in the Afro Gospel community. And then the project itself drops, I think, on the 10th of February. So it's a big year. I trusting God to help us do really, really dope things. That's me shamelessly plugging myself. Follow me on Instagram everywhere. It's Angeloh.
Shameless plug accepted.
ITSANGELOH. Shameless
There's no,
plug.
there's no shame in shameless plug. Thank you
Um,
very much for Angelo.
Thank
If
you
you
so
have
much,
any
man.
comments, any questions, drop them in the comment section. We'll find a way to get that to him and work something out to get it back
Definitely.
to you. But
Definitely.
I'm pretty sure this has been an amazing conversation for me as it has been for you. So check us up tomorrow again for another amazing conversation with another amazing person. And to that, I say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on what part of the world you're watching this or when you're watching this. And see you next time.